The Olympic Peninsula exists on a plane that feels both real and unreal. Its forests are dense, ancient, and heavy with moss, and the rain falls so constantly that it seems to seep into every crevice of the earth, every root and trunk. The air is cold, damp, and sharp, carrying the scent of wet earth and decay, yet strangely intoxicating, as if inhaling it slowly alters perception. This is a wilderness that humans navigate at their peril, a place where the familiar becomes strange, where distance and time lose meaning, and where disappearances are more common than comprehension. Hey guys! Welcome to another episode of stories that will make you question whether you're truly alone right now. You're listening to Silent Scream Chronicles. Do well to subscribe, share, and hit the like button for more tales to come. And also let me know where you're listening from in the comments. John Gray pedaled his bicycle along winding roads that cut through the peninsula's dense forests, each turn carrying him deeper into isolation. The town of Santa Cruz, the familiar streets of his home, the city's relentless pressures, they all faded behind him with each rotation of his wheels. This journey was meant to be an escape, a reset, a cleansing of the mind. But the forest had plans far different from those of any human traveler. The forest seemed to notice him. Every step of the journey drew him further from civilization and closer to something that existed beyond measurement. The pine trees leaned over the road as if scrutinizing his presence. Moss dripped from branches, slick and dark, and small streams crossed the path without warning, their waters cold enough to numb toes through worn shoes. The birds were silent. Even the wind seemed cautious, whispering along branches in a language he could almost understand but not entirely. On his second night, John camped beside the Solduc River. The water moved fast, cutting through stones and roots, carrying reflections of gray skies like liquid metal. He arranged his small camp meticulously, tent pitched, backpack stowed, and 4 arrows placed in the soft ground around him. Each arrow was sharpened, each etched with symbols indecipherable to any observer. The patterns hinted at ritual, planning, or perhaps an unspoken plea. It was not chaos. It was deliberate, calculated, intentional. By dawn, John Gray had vanished. The tent remained upright, zipped tightly. The backpack lay untouched. The bicycle rested against a tree as if waiting for its rider. Search teams arrived quickly. Helicopters cut through the fog, canine units swept the underbrush, volunteers combed the trails with meticulous care. But no evidence could be found. No footprints, no scraps of fabric, no trace of blood. The forest had swallowed him entirely. Grief arrived in human form in the shape of Randy Gray, John's father. Randy's face was sun-weathered, etched with worry lines that deepened with each passing day. He returned again and again to the forest, tracing the same paths, studying every bend in the Solduc, every fallen log, every patch of mud. For Randy, hope could only exist in minutiae, in careful observation. If he could not find his son, he could at least understand the landscape that had taken him. Weeks passed. The official search wound down. Authorities withdrew. But the forest did not relent. Patterns emerged that confounded logic. John was not the first to disappear in these woods, nor would he be the last. There were clusters of vanishings, seemingly random yet hauntingly consistent in their circumstances. Hikers, hunters, and wanderers who left nothing behind. In some cases, dogs used in the searches refused to track scents, howling at invisible presences instead. The bushmen whispered of shifting trees, disappearing trails, and landscapes that rearranged themselves overnight. The forest had memory, and it acted. Randy, desperate for answers, consulted with psychics, cryptic researchers, and local elders. One woman on Vancouver Island claimed to hear John's voice carried by the wind through the pines, distant but unmistakable. She spoke of thin places, where the boundary between this world and another thinned, allowing passage. Other sources, equally unexplainable, hinted at portals, invisible doorways through which the forest claimed its victims. Each story suggested the same truth. The forest was patient, methodical, and selective. It did not merely take, it orchestrated. Billman, chronicling the disappearances, observed the same patterns. The forest had its own logic, beyond the grasp of human understanding. It responded to presence. Concealed, misled, and erased. Branches blocked sightlines. Moss shifted. Fog rolled unnaturally. Even the rivers, the constant rivers of the peninsula, seemed to guide or impede those who followed. The arrows John had placed became symbols of something greater. Not mere markers, they suggested preparation, ritual, or understanding. Their placement in the earth formed a cryptic map, invisible to all but the one who understood its meaning. Those who disappeared were not accidents. They were participants in a narrative dictated by the forest, and the forest was always patient. Randy, in his obsession, documented everything meticulously. He returned to the same riverbanks, clambered over ridges, followed faint traces of movement that defied explanation. Each time the forest shifted. Footprints appeared and disappeared. Moss-covered rocks seemed to change position overnight. Trees leaned differently, as though observing, recording, or even warning. The forest was alive, not in the human sense, but in an alien, deliberate intelligence that existed outside ordinary perception. One night, Randy noticed something terrifying. An arrow, identical to those John had placed at his camp, lay in a patch of mud far from any trail. Its markings were precise, familiar. He had not placed it. No human had. The forest itself seemed to have delivered it. Randy understood then that the wilderness was not just passive. It was aware, calculating, selective. And in its awareness, it had claimed him as well. The searchers found only the arrow. Billman returned alone, notebook in hand, retracing paths, observing anomalies, and documenting every subtle change in the environment. The forest was a shifting labyrinth. Patterns revealed themselves in whispers, in fleeting movements at the edge of perception, in the sudden disappearance of mud impressions or the rearrangement of fallen branches. The Cold Vanish had rules. Those who understood them survived. Those who did not vanished. The final night of Part 1 drew Billman to the clearing where Randy had disappeared. The trees pressed closer. The mist rolled in like living fingers, and the forest exhaled in a manner he could feel rather than hear. Footprints, impossible to attribute to humans or animals, led deeper into the thicket. The wind carried voices, soft and fragmented, echoes of those who had vanished before. He stepped forward. The forest seemed to bend around him, alive with patient intent. And then the trail behind him vanished. The forest had him, not yet gone but watched. Its patience was eternal, and its pattern had only just begun to reveal itself. The Cold Vanish waits for those who follow, drawing them deeper into its labyrinth. The forest does not merely hide the lost, it reshapes reality itself to claim them. The forest is patient. It waits without haste, without need, beyond the measurement of human time. Billman had returned to the Olympic Peninsula, drawn by the pattern, compelled by the unsolved vanishing of John Gray and his father Randy. The forest welcomed him, not with warmth, but with quiet calculation. The pines leaned, the moss thickened, the fog crept along the forest floor like a living organism. Every step forward carried a weight, and every sound seemed amplified in the unnatural silence. He moved slowly, deliberately, documenting every anomaly. Branches twisted in impossible angles. The wind carried whispers of human speech, unintelligible but unmistakably alive. Footprints appeared briefly in mud and snow, distorted and unnerving. Rocks shifted slightly between glances, as if rearranging themselves to obscure a path. Even the rivers seemed aware, diverting subtly to mislead, to conceal, to isolate. Billman retraced the paths of John and Randy Gray, mapping the locations of their disappearances, the sites where arrows had been planted, the spots where the ground bore impressions too deep for ordinary human feet. Each detail added to a growing pattern that transcended time and geography. Other vanishings appeared to intersect this same logic. Hikers in Alaska, hunters in Montana, travelers across the Pacific Northwest who had stepped off trails and never returned. The forest had a method, had memory. It selected its victims with deliberate intent. He documented the psychological effect on those who searched. Park rangers, volunteers, and locals spoke of a presence, a sense of being observed, of hearing footsteps or voices when none should exist. Some swore they had glimpsed figures moving at the edges of their vision, tall, human-like, yet impossibly fast and silent. Anxiety grew among search teams, and the forest itself seemed to feed on that unease. It did not strike. It merely waited, shaping perception, slowing comprehension, deepening fear. The arrows John had placed emerged as central symbols in this puzzle. Meticulously crafted, etched with cryptic runes, they suggested intent, ritual, or perhaps understanding of forces unseen. They marked a map invisible to ordinary human eyes. The forest itself seemed to respect these markers, acknowledging them as thresholds, points of passage, or warnings. Those who vanished were not merely lost. They were participants in a pattern orchestrated by something older, something aware, something patient. Weeks passed. Billman moved from site to site, cataloging every anomaly. Moss-covered rocks shifted. Footprints vanished or distorted. Streams, previously predictable, changed their courses subtly overnight. He realized the forest itself was the agent of disappearance, bending reality, erasing evidence, guiding observers away from the truth. Those who entered without understanding could not escape. He discovered other clues. Faint, unexplained markings in tree bark, symbols that matched the arrow's design. There were scattered personal items belonging to previous missing hikers, an abandoned glove, a broken water bottle, but no bodies. He mapped these findings, tracing a web that spanned decades and hundreds of miles. Each node represented an individual claimed by the wilderness, each anomaly a testament to the forest's intelligence and intent. Billman grew increasingly aware of the forest's awareness of him. Branches seemed to shift subtly as he walked. Fog thickened where he paused. Shadows bent toward him in impossible ways. At night, the wind carried fragments of sound. Whispers, cries, laughter, human and not human. He began to sleep fitfully, waking to the sensation of unseen observers, sometimes catching glimpses of movement that dissolved when he focused. The pattern revealed a horrifying logic. The forest did not act randomly. It responded to human presence, guiding, shaping, choosing. Those who vanished had unknowingly interacted with thresholds, thin spots in the world where the forest's design intersected human perception. The missing were never truly gone. They existed in a state that could not be measured, a liminal space between this world and the next. The Cold Vanish was a natural law as immutable and indifferent as gravity or decay. One night, Billman returned to the Sol Duc River, the site of John Gray's disappearance. The fog rolled in thick and unnatural, muffling sound, distorting light. Footprints appeared in the mud, impossibly deep, elongating unnaturally, leading toward the thickest parts of the forest. They vanished halfway, leaving no trail. The river whispered. The wind carried words, indistinct but deliberate. Billman followed cautiously, recording, documenting, aware of the forest's observation. The clearing where Randy had disappeared revealed another anomaly. An arrow identical to those John had placed, lying in mud far from any trail, pointing deeper into the forest. Billman examined it, understanding that the forest itself had delivered it. The markings matched, precise, deliberate, as though the wilderness was communicating in a language beyond comprehension. He realized with a cold certainty, the forest had chosen him as well. Billman stood at the edge of the forest, notebook clutched in damp hands, the fog thickening around him like a living wall. For weeks, he had followed footprints, arrows, and the subtle distortions in moss and mud, mapping patterns that spanned decades. He had seen traces of those who had vanished, glimpses of the impossible, but no bodies, no final answers, until tonight. The wind shifted, carrying whispers that were almost words, fragments of voice. Follow, find, disappear. He moved cautiously, recording everything, aware that the forest had been watching him, anticipating his every step. The path narrowed, the undergrowth thickened, and the river that had guided him all this time now seemed to vanish beneath the fog. Then, in a small clearing illuminated by faint moonlight, he saw it, a human figure standing perfectly still, pale and drenched in fog, staring toward him. Recognition struck like a blade. The figure was John Gray. Not fully alive, not fully gone, as if the forest had preserved him in some liminal state, a threshold between worlds. His expression was calm, eyes distant, mouth opening to speak, but only a whisper escaping that Billman could not hear. Billman froze, heart hammering, realizing that the Cold Vanish had a purpose beyond mere disappearance. Did not kill. Collected. It preserved. It transformed those it claimed into something beyond human understanding. Randy Gray appeared moments later, emerging from the shadows. His face identical to the last time he had been seen, unchanged by time, untethered from mortality. Billman raised his camera, notebook, and equipment, documenting everything. The forest pulsed around him, every tree, branch, and stone attuned to his presence. It had led him here, showing him a fraction of its truth. The realization was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The wilderness of the Olympic Peninsula was not merely a location. It was an intelligence, ancient, deliberate, and patient. Those who vanished were not victims. They were absorbed into a narrative beyond human comprehension. As he documented, John and Randy stepped backward, retreating into the fog, dissolving like mist into nothingness. The forest claimed them again, but Billman knew he had witnessed what others never could. The mechanism of the Cold Vanish was not random, it was law. The forest exhaled around him, and Billman turned back toward civilization. The path had returned, rivers flowed as expected, and the fog receded. The wilderness had allowed him to leave, but he carried its secret. He had closure not in the form of rescue, but understanding. The pattern was complete. The forest's method, its intent, had been revealed. Back at his base, Billman compiled his notes, diagrams, and recordings. The Cold Vanish was real. It was selective, intelligent, and enduring. It existed beyond the bounds of logic, history, and geography. It was both a warning and a revelation. The forest waits, always, patiently, claiming those who wander unprepared. And yet, there was a final note, scrawled in his own handwriting, almost a whisper from the forest itself. Do not linger. The path is patient, but patience is infinite. Those who follow may never return. Billman published his account, not merely as a story, but as a guide, a warning, and a testament. Hikers, explorers, and dreamers who step into the wilderness must respect it. Not just the terrain, but the unseen forces that shape it. He had survived, but survival carried the weight of knowledge and the realization that the Cold Vanish is always waiting, always watching. The wilderness of the Pacific Northwest is breathtaking, but beneath its beauty lies a patient intelligence, a force beyond human understanding. Those who vanish in these forests do not simply get lost. They become part of a pattern, a design that transcends time, memory, and reality. If you found this story chilling, subscribe to Silent Scream Chronicles and hit the bell. We explore the real-life mysteries, disappearances, and shadows lurking along trails like the Pacific Crest, the Olympic Peninsula, and beyond. Share your own encounters, but remember, some trails may not lead back, and some forests never forget.